But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you. If I don't say the words, then maybe it's not true. It feels alright.
Hi, welcome along to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith. It is Those Were the Days with George Mitchell, where George takes us back in time and looks at Newcastle United seasons gone by. Which season are we going to today, George?
71-72, Steve.
71-72, into the year of my birth, George, 1972, February. So I'm looking forward to hearing. I'm looking forward to hearing what misery happened then, and I've got a feeling I know what you're going to tell us. But we'll not spoil the surprise for that.
Well, our Neil was born in October 71 as well, so it was quite a year for me as well.
Great stuff. Well, we'll leave it to you, George. Over to you.
71-72. Well, just to set the scene for what things were happening elsewhere. Top of the pops. I printed the top 10 out this time. George Harrison, My Sweet Lord. John Lennon, Imagine. Lynn Anderson, Beg Your Pardon. Never Promised You a Rose Garden. Rod Stewart, Maggie May. Rolling Stones, Brown Sugar. Isaac Hayes, theme from Shaft, which was a fantastic tune. I remember that very well. Tom Jones, She's a Lady. The Dog Night, Three Dog Night, Joy to the World, and Carole King, It's Too Late, and Tony Yolanda and Dawn, Knock Three Times. I mean, what a top 10.
I know all of those songs as well. So yeah. I mean, that's fantastic.
Yeah, and if you're a cinema goer, there was some good movies as well. Clockwork Orange, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, Dirty Harry, which is one of my favourites, I've got to say. I don't know what it is about it, but perhaps it is inbuilt violence in me somewhere. But French Connection, which was another brilliant movie. So there were lots of fantastic things happening outside. And typical Newcastle, of course, off the pitch, there was as much happening as there was on the pitch, because Joe Harvey was desperate to get some new players in. He chased Malcolm MacDonald down to the nth degree and eventually got him. And he got Terry Hibbert to sort of set the bullets up for Mac the Fire. And then he also was trying very hard for a long time to get little Tony Green from Blackpool. He didn't get him initially, but halfway through this season, he did get him. So there was a lot going on, and that's the squad. Harvey was lucky in the sense that Lord Westwood was chairman, and Lord Westwood was a fan of his. Lord Westwood was a good supporter of Harvey. I don't think many supporters knew that, but he was, and Joe was grateful for that. But it's interesting. Keith Birkinshaw was the coach for Joe Harvey. Bob Moncur was our captain, as he's sitting next to Harvey in that picture. And as I said, Lord Westwood was chairman. And of course, for the first time for many years, we had a goal scorer who in the season scored 30 goals. And of course, that was Supermac. However, that's it. It's fascinating that he did, because in the whole season of 42 games, we only scored 48 goals and Supermac scored 30 of them. So God knows what would have happened if we hadn't had Supermac there. So that kind of sets the scene for what's happening. All sorts of players coming and going, as I say. Gordon Hodgson went out came in rather from the juniors, signed up. Terry Hibbert came from Leeds, and Pat Howard came from Barnsley. Billy Coulson came from North Shields. Now, Billy I knew because he lived at Winlayton, very near us in Winlayton when we lived up there. Eventually, Tony Green came in October of 71 from Blackpool. Alex Reid came from Dundee United. and George Hope was another promotion from the juniors. So there were lots of movement in the pre-season, and the season didn't get off to the hottest of starts. We started, as usual, we had our round of friendlies at the beginning of the season. We played Saint-Étienne, and then the second one was a home friendly against Sporting Lisbon, and of course, Benfica. And of course, the Eusebio played for them. And I think the next two photographs, that's Eusebio coming off the pitch. Nice man, the Black Panthers is his nickname, but very generous in signing autographs for kids and all the rest of it. You can see how he was mobbed, but it didn't faze him at all, is my memory. We beat Benfica 1-0 in that match. So. And then we went away to Aberdeen and had a friendly at Aberdeen and beat Aberdeen 3-2. There's a slight irony to doing this today, because today is actually John Tudor's birthday.
Yeah, we're pre-recording this show, of course, but it is John Tudor's birthday today. And of course, it's the start of the FA Cup, which will come.
That's right. And of course, it was in this season that the partnership between Tudor and MacDonald developed. It was a bit slow in starting, but it developed in that time. So it's interesting that it should be John Tudor's birthday. Our first game was an away game to Palace, which we lost 2-0.
And there's the programme.
And that's the programme, that's right. And we started the season with McFall, David Craig, Frank Clark, Tommy Gibb, John McNamee, Irvin Natras, Keith Dyson, John Tudor, Malcolm MacDonald, David Young, and Terry Hibbett. And that was our first team that season. Palace had a tidy side, but they weren't expected to do very much in the league. But as usual, the names that you pick out with them at this time, in this particular decade, a lot of their players are former Chelsea or Arsenal players who wanted to stay in London. Like Bobby Tamblyn was their outside left, and Terry Wharton came from Arsenal. Alan Birchinall came Sheffield, Arsenal, then Crystal Palace. The one player they had who was their own and who was quite a talented player was Steve Kember. Now, I remember Steve Kember myself. He was quite a talented midfield player. Played for England, I think, a couple of times, but not on a regular basis. But he was a tidy footballer. So we got off to a 2-0 defeat with Tamblyn and Taylor scoring the goals. We then had another away game. As I've noticed before when we've done this, the fixtures were never very kind to us at the beginning of the year. Anyway, we've got another away game at Tottenham, and that's the programme, yeah. And well, we didn't do too badly. We got a 0-0 draw, which was very few of the pundits were expecting me to get that, having got beat at Palace. And it was quite a tidy game, 42,700 at the match at White Hart Lane. And we played exactly the same team as we did at Palace. McFall, Craig, Clark, Gibb, and Moncur, McNamee, Moncur, Dyson, Tudor, MacDonald, David Young, and Terry Hibbett. Now, Spurs, of course, were a team of all-stars at that time. They were winning lots of things. Pat Jennings in goal, and then a name that become one which was of interest to us eventually, called Joe Kinnear, was right back. And some people would say they wished he'd stayed right back. Never mind coming here, upsetting us, but never mind. Phil Beale, Mike England was a good centre half, a Welsh centre half. Steve Perryman, who played a lot of times for England. And then on the right wing, they'd bought a Geordie from Burnley called Ralph Coates. Ralph Coates is from Ashington. and he was playing for England, but he'd gone to Tottenham. Alan Mullery was playing, Martin Chivers, and then Martin Peters, who they'd bought from West Ham, who featured highly in the World Cup. And on the left side of their attack, they had a Scottish centre forward called Alan Gilzine, a very talented footballer and very clever on the ball for a big man. He wasn't how can I say, he wasn't a roughhouse centre forward. Alan Gilzine was a real tidy footballer. So we went to Tottenham and we got an 0-0 draw in front of quite a big crowd. So we then came home to a game against Liverpool, and of course this was important for lots of features. Yes, it was Liverpool, but it was also Malcolm McDonald's home debut for Newcastle United, and what a debut it was. I mean, I was there, and thank my lucky stars I was there. That's him there. I think that was when he scored his third goal. And we beat them 3-2. The game started off, I remember, with Emlyn Hughes scoring a goal in very early on. I think it was about 11 minutes, 10 or 11 minutes he scored. Yeah, 11 minutes. And everybody thought, oh, goodness, we're in for a run around here. But 26 minutes, we got a penalty, and of course, Supermax slotted that away. And then after that, the game was his. He terrorised the Liverpool defence for the rest of that game. And he got a second goal in 44, just before half-time. And then in the middle of the second half, he got his third goal, got his hat-trick goal. And I think that's the one he's celebrating there. Fantastic. What a debut. And it's little wonder that the crowd took to him straight away, because he made such an impression. And I know Malcolm himself remembers how he was amazed at how quickly the crowd was singing his praises on the terraces immediately after that match, which was quite something. But what a debut! What a debut to make! What a debut!
And of course, the goal that he scored, the first goal he scored, was a penalty, and it was given away by somebody who made a big part of Newcastle's history years later, Kevin Keegan.
Kevin Keegan, that's right. Well, and the consolation goal for them at the end to get it 3-2 was Kevin Keegan as well. He scored the consolation goal towards the end on about 80 minutes. So we're off to a winning start at home at least, and we want to keep it that way if we can. The next is a home game against Huddersfield. Now there's no picture for that one, Steve. We had Huddersfield at home, but it's interesting the reaction after a big game like that Liverpool game. Liverpool, we had 39,700. That next game against Huddersfield a week later, well, normally you would be 20,000 for a Huddersfield, 46,989, all on the back, I think, of Supermax hat-trick. I think people came back expecting some more. It was a tremendous crowd for a game like that. And then it was 0-0. It was quite a dour game, particularly after the antics of the Liverpool game. But that was a huge crowd for a game like Huddersfield. We then moved on to an away game at Coventry City, and people hoped that we're on the track to doing something special. Well, there's only one thing you don't get if you support Newcastle United. That's your hopes fulfilled, because we only lost 1-0, but it could have been a lot more. It really was a bad defeat at Coventry, and of course to add grist to the mill, as it were, the team was the same team we'd played all the way through from the start of the season. McFall, Craig, Clark, Gibb. John McNamee was injured, and Ollie Burton came in at centre half. Moncur, Tommy Cassidy, John Tudor, Malcolm McDonald, David Young, and Terry Hibbert. Now, Coventry had one or two characters in that team, but difficult to call them stars. But they're certainly well-known players. And Bill Glazier, the goalkeeper, a lot of people think he should have been an England player, but he wasn't. But he was well liked and well acknowledged as a player in the first division. And at the left back, they had a bloke called Jeff Blockley. Now he was a left back who was just as likely to pop up and do damage in the opponent's penalty area as he was on his own, and he did on this occasion because he was the one that scored the winning goal for Coventry. The beat were 1-0, but it could have been a lot more than that. It took them till the 56th minute to get the goal, but they made hard work of it, and we really didn't look that clever on that match in that game at all. So the next one is an away match to Leeds, and I think no, a disaster is the only way I can describe this. We got beat 5-1. Even the goal we got was an own goal by Norman Hunter. Jackie Charlton, Peter Lorimer, Johnny Giles, Paul Madeley, Terry Uriff scored their goals. 5-1. It was 2-0 at half time. Never got into the game. And amazingly, when Leeds were nearly at the top of the league all that time, there were only 18,600 at the match, which is quite disappointing. There's an interesting fact about the match, though. It was played at Hillsborough, not at Elland Road, because just before this game, Leeds had a game where the referee had awarded a dubious penalty, and the fans invaded the pitch and stopped the match. And it took them a while to get the game started again. And when the thing was finished, Don Revie and that chairman, what was his name, the chairman, Woodall, had lots of nasty things to say about the referee and about everybody else. So the FA said, right, if that's how you feel, we'll shut you down. So they shut Elland Road for a month. So for 4 fixtures, for 4 weeks, they couldn't play at Elland Road, and they played at Hillsborough, at Sheffield. And this match against us was at Hillsborough. So it's an interesting fact in that particular game. But it's about what Leeds were about, actually, both on and off the field. They always had a lot to say for themselves. And with Jackie Charlton and Norman Hunter biting people's legs, there was a lot to say on the field as well. So the next game was a home game against West Ham United, and we started to pull things together a bit, and we got a 2-2 draw with John Tudor and Tommy Cassidy scoring for us, and Jeff Hurst and a certain Pop Robson who'd been transferred from Newcastle to West Ham scored the equaliser. It was 31,000 at the game, which is quite a nice crowd. It was a good game, actually. I remember I'd been at this match, and West Ham were playing good football at the time, and there was still a lot of interest in the former World Cup players, like you had Bobby Moore and Trevor Brooken and of course Jeff Hurst, and of course Pop Robson was in that team as well, and other names who are still prominent in football these days, Billy Bonds and Frank Lampard, senior. Frank Lampard Senior was still playing in this team, so there were a team that people would go and see. So we had a decent draw against West Ham United. The next game was Manchester City away, and we went to Main Road, and unfortunately lost 2-1. Wasn't a surprise to people because Manchester City were playing quite well, but disappointing in the sense people were beginning to think we were on the up when we got the odd point and so on. However, people also noticed that we're hovering around the bottom of the league at the moment, which is not very nice. 2-1 we lost with Bell and Lee, Francis Lee scoring for City, and Supermax scoring for us. Our team, as before, McFall, Craig, Frank Clark was injured, so Ron Guthrie came in. Otherwise, it was the same: Gibb, Burton, Cassidy, Tudor, MacDonald. Irvin Natness slipped into where David Young had been, because Terry Hibbert was injured and David Young went out on the left to take Terry's place. We always seem to have good games against Manchester City. With all these things, every time I look at them, there's always a good game. And of course, Manchester City had some characters in their team, with Joe Corrigan, the giant goalkeeper of theirs. Tony Book, ancient fullback. I mean, Tony Book was pushing 35 by the time they played this match. Willie Donaghy, the Scottish defender. Mike Summerby, right winger stroke centre forward, very dangerous forward. Francis Lee, Colin Bell, Ian Miller, and at centre forward, Wyn Davis, because by this time Joe Harvey had sold Wyn Davis to Manchester City. He felt he'd got the most he could get out of Wyn, and he had gone to Manchester City by then. He didn't score, but I've no doubt he gave hard time. That's the way Wyn played. He wouldn't get it. Then we suddenly, typical Newcastle, we're in the middle of a big league program, which, as I say, we're hovering around the bottom. We need to get points, but what do? We have a friendly against Hearts. We go to Edinburgh to have this friendly against Hearts, and we managed to lose at 1-0, which is beyond my comprehension that we used to do this so regularly. And we sent a full team. I mean, it was McFall, Craig, Guthrie, Gibb, Ollie Burton, Frank Clark played on the left side of defence rather than fullback. And then a young man called Stuart Barraclough came into the team. Tudor, MacDonald, Irvin Natras, and Terry Hibbert. So virtually a full team at this match at Edinburgh. We managed to lose at 1-0 with a crowd of 18,000. So I always try and find out why. Is it a testimonial or not? But it wasn't. It was just a friendly. It had been arranged. So anyway, yeah, I mean, if you were winning everything, and it was there, you could understand it. But we're struggling. We're at the bottom of the bloody league, and we now have a home game rather against Wolves, and we get a 2-0 win, and that brightens things up for everybody. 29,347 at the match, and we 2 goals, one from Terry Hibbert and one from John Tudor. Now I remember that this was the first John Tudor goal. He had this knack of scoring these diving headers where his nose was about an inch off the surface of the ground. And this goal against Wolves was one of those. Hibbert banged in this very, very low cross from the left side, and John just dived, as the only way you can say, headlong, and bang, it went into the back of the net. And that was one of his trademarks, I thought, these crazy headers he used to make. Well, that was one of them. I think he probably scratched his nose when he headed it in. Anyway, a 2-0 win, and it was a good win. And the team's back to full strength with Frank Clark back, and except that Ollie Burton's injured, and Joe Harvey throws in Pat Howard, who he just bought from Barnsley, and Pat Howard had a good game actually. Wolves, well, they had a number of characters, Dave Wagstaff and Mike O'Grady, and the centre forward, of course, was the big Irishman, Derek Dugan, who was a roughhouse centre forward, as I would call it. He didn't take any prisoners, that's for sure. And but that was a good win, and people were quite more than pleased about that. And we then go and have an away game at Ipswich, and Ipswich aren't pulling up any trees. Everybody thinks, well, surely we'll get something there, and it's but it's a 0-0 draw anyway, and 18,700 at Portman Road, and we teams unchanged from the previous game. Stuart Barraclough's retained his place, and Pat Howard retained the centre half place, with Ollie Burton being injured. Ipswich had some decent, more than decent players in that side. I mean, Mick Mills, the fullback, was the England fullback, and they had the start of all their Dutch players, Colin Vilhuren, and Mickey Hill, one of their forwards, was a tidy player and very dangerous. And Johnny Miller, the left winger, was also a very dangerous character. So 0-0 draw at Ipswich, which really people expected, I've got to say, because Ipswich weren't pulling up trees either. At least having got that point in the previous one at home, we're at least a couple of spots off the bottom now, which is hopeful, is what I'd say. But we're still where we shouldn't be, and so we then come back to Ipswich, and we come back home, and guess what? A return friendly against Hearts at St James's Park. We win 2-1 with Matt McDonald scoring both the goals, and 24,500 at the game, which I think is more than reasonable for a midweek. For what basically
midweek friendly during the season.
Yeah, that's right. So we get that win and get that out of the way. The next game is at Derby County at home, and everybody's hoping that this is going to see the start of a turnaround. We're not pulling up any trees at the moment, but unfortunately, Derby beat with 1-0 with 31,900 in the ground. To say that people are disappointed is putting it mildly. I actually went to this game because a couple of my relatives from Derby came to the match and came and stayed with my mother and went to the match with her and stood in the Gallagher corner with her, which they enjoyed greatly. Because as you can imagine, once people realised they were from Derby, they were getting their legs pulled up unmercifully by the Gallagher characters. But it was all good, all in good fun, and they enjoyed their weekend. But we didn't enjoy it because we lost 1-0. And same team we played that we played all season. McFall, Craig. Frank Clark was injured, and young Ray Ellison came in at left back. It was a tiny player, but didn't stay in the first team very long. Derby, they had some well-known players in their squad, like Colin Todd, who used to play for our friends down the road for a long time. Roy McParland was their captain and centre half. John McGovern, who was ex-Nottingham Forest, who Brian Clough was Derby's manager, and he'd obviously brought McGovern. Alan Durbin, a another ex-Mackham, John O'Hare, another ex-Mackham, and Kevin Hector, who'd been brought by Clough into Derby as well. But we lost 1-0, and that was sending us in the wrong direction, is how I would put it. And unfortunately, our next game then is FA Cup third round, and we play Arsenal at Arsenal. And, well, that's the end of our FA Cup, I'm afraid, as we got beat 4-0. Well and truly took us to the cleaners with Radford 2, Graham and Kennedy scoring the goals. And the Arsenal team was a team of all-stars, and some of them we knew quite well. Bob Wilson in goal, Pat Rice at fullback, Frank McClintock, Geordie Armstrong on the right wing, who was from Heaven, Ray Kennedy from Seaton Delaval, George Graham and John Radford. They were a decent team. Well, they really turned it on for us. 34,500 at the game, but that was the end of our FA Cup that year, I'm afraid. Which we'd hoped to have a run, but hopes don't always come with you. Yeah, it's then lo and behold, as luck would have it, we end up having to go to Arsenal the next weekend for a league game. So we go thinking, well, we're going to get walloped again, surely. Well, we did, but not as bad. It was 4-2 with Graham Armstrong, Kennedy and Kelly scoring theirs, and Malcolm McDonald scoring both.
Just double checking, George. I don't like to stop you in your pride here, but you've got that Arsenal game in there. I'm just double checking. 71-72 at the FA Cup. Was that not Hereford?
Oh, sorry. Did I say FA Cup?
League Cup. FA Cup. It was League Cup, yeah.
League Cup, sorry.
Cup, yeah.
You're right.
No worries, mate. No worries.
No, that's absolutely right, Steve.
And I think the programme is because it's got the League Cup on. That's what made us think of that.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. Thanks, Steve. That's right.
Well, yeah, no worries. So the next week was the Texaco, was it?
We went back for we went back for a we went back for a league game against Arsenal.
Right. Okay.
And it was I mean, everybody expected we haven't got thrashed 4-0 one week. Well, it's not going to turn very much to the next weekend. And we lost 4-2, but and the teams were almost identical to the word in the initial game. So we struggled with that one a little bit, and it was unfortunate. It was all at the same time. Actually, I had a program in for that match as well, and when I was setting it up, and I seen the two together, I thought, oh, that's a mistake having two together, and I got rid of one, so I should have just left it where it was. But never mind. Crystal Palace was next at home, and everybody thought, well, come on, it's time we start to get some winning, because we're now into October, and we're actually touching the bottom now, which has got everybody in a panic. So we got Palace at home, 20,700 at the match, and don't we go and lose it 2-1. Bobby Tamblyn scores both their goals, and Keith Dyson scores ours. Our team, slight changes. McFall, Ray Ellison goes to right back because David Craig's injured. Frank Clark's back, Tommy Gibb, Pat Howard. David Young comes in at the left side defence. Tommy Cassidy, Keith Dyson, Malcolm McDonald, John Tudor, and Terry Hibbert. And I remember being at this game, and it was a poor game. The Palace weren't very good either, and their side was virtually the same side that played us when we went to their place, with Bobby Tamblyn on the left and Steve Kember playing for them, and they've got a new goalkeeper called John Jackson, who was being touted as the next less thing than sliced bread for England, all the rest of it. I don't know if he ever got the England game, but I don't know. He seemed to disappear as quick as he came on the scene. But with the important thing for us is we lost 2-1, and we're now sitting right on the bottom of the league. It just a disaster waiting to happen. And we now are getting involved in the Texaco Cup, and we go to Coventry for the Texaco Cup. And there was a lot of debate about this cup, whether we should get involved or whether we shouldn't, and because it was a chance to try and win a trophy, I suppose, when people looked at the opposition, thought, well, we should have a really reasonable chance of doing something with this. Anyway, our first game was against Coventry, at Coventry, and we got a 1-1 draw, which was better than the league game we had there. And our team, with the 12,500 at the game, which always staggers me that clubs in the top division could survive on those sort of crowds. And our team was the same as played in the previous game. McFall, Ellison, Clark, Guthrie, Ollie Burton comes in alongside Pat Howard, Tommy Gibb, John Tudor, Malcolm MacDonald, Irvin Atlas, and Terry Hibbert. But we got a 1-1 draw, and it was what a read if it was an entertaining game. I mean, I've got no other need telling that than what I could find to read about the game, and. So anyway, we survive the Coventry game, and next we're home to Manchester United, and we're desperate for points now because we're sitting on the bottom, but not the best team to come when you're desperate for anything. Well, they beat us 1-0, thanks to a goal from a young man called George Best. But the crowd, 55,600.
Wow.
I mean, really, after the run of results that we've had, that people would turn out in those sort of numbers. And it was a good game. We give them a game, but unfortunately they just had the little bit extra. Team was the same. It was a settled team we had now. With Ray Ellison keeping the right back spot. John Tudor got injured halfway through the second half, and Stuart Barraclough came substituted for him. But Manchester United's team of all stars, Alex Stepney in goal, David Sadler at fullback, Tony Dunn, Willie Morgan, George Best, Bobby Charlton, and a name we'd get to know later, Alan Gowling, which is somebody we get to know very well much later, Brian Kidd, and then Dennis Slow. And I've got to be honest, when I look at that team now, getting away with just a 1-0 defeat wasn't too bad when you analyse who was actually playing and what was what. But the trouble is that sits right firmly on the bottom of the league now. We're starting to get really worried. In the next game, we've got is an away game at Everton, that's the program. Interesting program actually. With the team photos on the front, which is interesting. Everton beat with 1-0, and goal scored by none other than the little ginger lad that was in the World Cup, Alan Ball. He scored the goal that mattered. And their team, well, characters, Gordon West, the goalkeeper, and that's Alan Ball celebrating. And Tommy Wright, John Hurst at fullback, Colin Harvey is one of the half-backs, Alan Ball, Johnny Morrissey, Jimmy Husband, who played for Newcastle Schoolboys but never ever played for Newcastle, and Joe Royal, of course, who was the talisman centre forward. So we lose in front of a crowd of 38,800 at Goodison Park. We lose 1-0. So now we're headed back to home for the second Texaco Cup game against Coventry City. There's a second leg of the Texaco Cup. Is there a picture, Steve? I think there should be.
No, not for this one.
Not for that one, right? I don't know what happened. I don't know what Harvey said, but we beat them 5-1, and it was a real thrashing with Malcolm MacDonald scoring and his link up with John Tudor suddenly clicking is the best way to describe it. Malcolm scored, Tudor got 2. The Blockley, like their fullback, scored another one to get them a consolation, and then Irvin Natras and Blockley, who scored for them, then ended the scoring with an own goal himself. He was a character, but he was a desperado as well. He was always likely to do something like that, score an own goal as well as the goal for the team. So the 5-1 pushed us through the Texaco Cup. So that was something. But more importantly, people were starting to get a sweat on about the league. I mean, we're going nowhere. So the next match is a home match against Southampton, and everybody's hoping that the 5-1 wasn't a flash in the pan. Well, it appeared not to be, because we beat Southampton 3-1 with Malcolm MacDonald scoring 2 and Tony Green getting his first goal for Newcastle United on his, I think this was his debut game actually. And Craig was back at fullback, so had McFall, Craig Clark, Natras, Burton, Pat Howard, Stuart Barraclough, Tony Green, Malcolm MacDonald, John Tudor, and Terry Hibbert, who was now back from injury. Southampton had one or two interesting characters in the team, with Bobby Stokes in the forward line, who was later on was to win them a cup final against Manchester United. Terry Payne played for England for a lot of years. Mick Shannon, who came to us eventually towards the end of his career. Ron Davis, who interestingly enough, Harvey tried to buy for ages and then eventually turned to Wyn Davis instead. And I think that was a good mistake as far as we were concerned, because I think we got the better of the deal. Because I think Wyn Davis was better than Ron Davis, both Welshmen. But Southampton had a tidy team and had a good reputation. But 3-1 we beat them, and the crowd was 32,600. And we're off the bottom of the league, at least. That's something. That's the most important thing. We then go away to Leicester City, and I think there's a programme for Leicester City there somewhere. And that's it. And well, unfortunately, we lose 3-0. It was not a good game for us. We first goal went in very early, and we just seemed to cave in. That was it. I mean, 2 minutes, the lad called Brown scored that striker, and after that we were never in it. We just seemed to cave in, and team predictable. McFall, Craig Clark, Natras was in the team instead of Tommy Gibb, Ollie Burton, Pat Hurd, Barraclough, Green, MacDonald, Tudor, and Hibbert. 28,000 at the game, which was a big crowd for Leicester. But we got absolutely nothing from it at all. And as I say, the alarm bells are ringing in the Gallagher corner. The moans and groans about the place were almost audible in the Haymarket. Next game was a home game against Nottingham Forest, and everybody's hoping that it would be something that Forest weren't pulling up any trees either. In fact, they were right next to us in the league. In fact, I think they replaced us as bottom at the time. And we beat them 2-1. And Supermac gets both the goals. He gets one in 39 minutes just before half time. They equalise on 66, and then on 77, Malcolm MacDonald gets the winner for us. 24,500 at the game, and a win that really relieved everybody, because at least it meant that there was at least 2 or 3 people below us in the league. Now we weren't sitting on the bottom, and we're just as close to the middle of the league as we were the bottom. So 2-1 against Forest. Forest team was predictable. Barron who's a goalkeeper who comes from this part of the world. Peter Hindley, the centre half, was knock on the door of England. Duncan McKenzie, who they bought from Leeds United, very clever little player. And Peter Cormack also come back from Leeds United. And a young man playing inside left called Martin O'Neill, who's to become quite a character in the game, and still is. I mean, there was something on Twitter about him the other day talking about the World Cup. But he was a clever footballer as well. So they had a decent side, but they were, as far as we were concerned, thank goodness we beat them, because it meant it kept them below us. Now we're back to Texaco Cup territory, and we get Derby County in the next one, and we're away to Derby County, and it's a semi-final of the Texaco Cup, and 20,000 at the game, and Derby beat 1-0. Team that virtually the same team that beat 1-0 at St James's Park a couple of weeks before in the league, with Colin Todd, Roy McPartland, John McGovern, Archie Gemmell, John O'Hare, etc., all in the Derby team. Our team, predictable: McFall, Craig, Clarks, fit again, Natras, Burton, Howard, Barraclough, Green, MacDonald, Tudor, and Hibbert, which is not surprising. Harvey always very faithful to the people he picks, and he tries to keep the same team. So we were 1-0 down in the Texaco Cup semi-final, and not looking very, very promising forward. We're now away to Stoke City is the next game in the league, and we've got we send the same team to Stoke: McFall, Craig, Clark, etc. 16,800 at Victoria Ground, and Stoke team with a reasonable number of characters in their 11. Gordon Banks in goal, of course. Mike Bernard at wing half. Terry Conroy on the right wing, who they got from Burnley. Jimmy Greenhoff from Leeds. John Ritchie from Manchester City. John Mahoney, and then playing on the left wing for them that day, a young man called George Eastham, who, of course, got Stoke via Arsenal from Newcastle United. Anyway, we got a 3-3 draw, which I don't think people expected, because we're feeling a bit down. And Ritchie and Conroy scored their goals, and Supermac and David Craig scored our goals. It was, if I remember rightly, we went. Malcolm MacDonald put us in the lead in 15 minutes. Ritchie equalised, and then we give it away almost. Conroy scored in the 68th and 74th minute, so we were down 3-1, and then Supermac on 78, David Craig on 82, and we got a 3-3 draw, which everybody heaves a huge sigh of relief to get a point, considering how the way we were going. So then we return home to a home game against Chelsea. Is there a programme there for Chelsea?
No.
Well, nobody's expecting a lot out of this because Chelsea are flying high at the moment at this time. But again, we've got a good crowd of 37,586 for this Chelsea game, which is quite something considering some of the bad scores we've had. It's a 0-0 draw. Now, I do remember being at this game, and it was probably one of the most interesting 0-0 draws that I've seen, because Supermac hit the woodwork at least a couple of times, and Charlie Cook and Alan Hudson for them scored. It didn't score. It hit the woodwork for them. And the Chelsea team, our team, was almost as red. One slight change on the right. Stuart Barraclough was injured, and Alex Reid, who we got from Dundee United, went on the right wing. Otherwise, it was the same. But Chelsea team of all-stars: Peter Bonetti, John Dempsey at full-back, Bomber Harris playing in defence, David Webb, John Hollins, who's well-known, Charlie Cook, who they'd bought from Aberdeen, a great Scottish forward, Peter Houseman, who had a reputation, Alan Hudson, who played for England, very clever player. And then the lad that I said Palace had brought on themselves, called Steve Kember. Well, by now, Steve Kember was playing for Chelsea. Chelsea had bought him from Crystal Palace. And, of course, centre forward for them was none other than Peter Osgood. But, as I say, it was an end-to-end sort of game. Both teams hitting the woodwork more than once. Could easily have been a good scoring game, but it ended up with a 0-0. So then we're back to the second leg of the Texaco Cup semi-final with Derby County at home, and everybody thinks, well, we nearly beat them at their place. Surely we'll turn them over when they come home. Well, no such luck. They beat with 3-2, and that was the end of the Texaco Cup. But 37,200 turned up for this match. Whether that's, I think that's more of a wish from the crowd to see we win something more than anything. But it's a hell of a good crowd for a midweek match like that, which we're already behind. Anyway, our team's unchanged. They played against Chelsea, and 3-2 was the score to Derby. And yeah, now I know why. I was trying to remember why it was so disappointing. Well, it was so disappointing because we were winning 2-0. We were 2-0 up by just after half time. 40 minutes, Malcolm McDonald scores. 60 minutes, Stuart Barraclough scores. And then we go into extra time because a lad called Walker scores a goal for them. And we go into extra time, and McGovern and Todd score 2 goals in extra time to make it 3-2 to them, and push us out of the semi-final of the Texaco Cup. But we're actually winning 2-0. I was trying to remember myself why I was so disappointed at the game. Well, the answer was fairly easy. We threw it away is why it was so disappointing. So we now heading to a away game against West Brom. And West Brom,
was it West Brom or West Ham?
West Brom. Brom away.
Okay.
West Ham next. Next.
Just that's the next programme.
Yeah, that's right. That will be. We went to West Brom. We always have, in my opinion, we always have entertaining games against West Brom, a team that traditionally plays good football. Only 18,000 at the game, but for some reason, we suddenly turn it on and we beat them 3-0, with Supermax scoring 2 and Busby scoring the 3rd. And as I say, the huge impact that had on the bottom of the league, because it shuffled all sorts of people around, and we suddenly found ourselves now touching the middle of the league, And our team, nearly, well, it was identical. The only difference was that Tony Green was injured, so Stuart Barraclough came in for Tony Green. Otherwise, it was McFall, Craig Clark, Natras, Burton Howard, Alex Reid, Barraclough, MacDonald, or Viz Busby was in instead of John Tudor. John Tudor was injured, and Terry Hibbert. Actually, Viz Busby was an interesting character. I'm not always sure that we got the best out of him because I think he was a better player than we've seen. But never mind, that's just my opinion. Anyway, we won 3-0. That's the important thing, and what that did for our league position was nobody's business. So then we're off to West Ham now, another away game, and that's the program. That's right. And we've got 21,900 at the game, and we beat them 1-0. So that's 2 away wins on the trot. So we're now firmly middle of the league table instead of bounced around the bottom. And the scorer was Viv Busby. He scored the winning goal in 6 minutes, and we held on right at the end till we got we got the win. And so, you know, we're firmly, as I say, in the middle of the league now. Our team was predictable with Joe Harvey in charge. One change: David Craig was injured, so Ron Guthrie came in at right back instead of David Craig. Oh, and West Ham. Well, the West Ham team was full of their stars. I mean, Bobby Moore, Billy Bonds, Frank Lampard Senior, Trevor Brooklyn, Jeff Hurst, Pop Robson, and a West Indian left winger called Clyde Best, who was a very dangerous player. I remember, a very, very tricky player. But we got a 1-0 win, which is again sits us nicely in the middle of the league. And so we're coming home now to a home match, thank goodness, against Sheffield United. Now Sheffield United aren't doing anything special, so mistakenly everybody thinks, well, this is going to be a slaughter. We're going to get our own back here. Well, couldn't be further from the truth. Sheffield United beat with 2-1, and it was unbelievable. They scored in 2 minutes. Curry, the dangerous forward, scored the second on 52 minutes, and Terry Hibbert got a consolation on 73 minutes. But we lost 2-1 before a crowd of 53,079 for Sheffield United. I mean, you know, anybody dares tell me that the Newcastle fans are fickle or don't know what they're doing, I'd give them an argument any day, because the only thing that would bring people to that is sheer passion, Steve. That's all I can say. Is anyway, we get that defeat, which is not nice. It's not totally disastrous, but then we're off to away game at Wolves, and that's the next thing. Yeah, there it is. And everybody's hoping that we might recover, but no such luck. Wolves are on the metal waiting for us and beat us 2-0 with Parkin and Richards scoring their goals, 26,500 at the game, 1-0 at half time. But again, when I read bits of the paper, bits of the Chronicle particularly, a game we weren't ever in. We didn't seem to turn up. Our team predictable. Craig's fit again, so he's in at right back, and Tony Green's back, so it's McFall, Craig Clark, Natras, Burton Howard, Alex Reid, Tony Green, Malcolm MacDonald, John Tudor, and Terry Hibbert. Wolves got the usual side out with the stars, with Jim McCalliog now that they bought from Everton, a Scottish player, and Kenny Hibbert, Terry Hibbert's brother, they bought from Leeds, and John Richards playing at centre forward, David Wagstaff bought from Manchester City, and the Irishman Derek Dugan, who was also playing up front for them. So, and it was Parkin and Richards that scored for them, not Dugan. But we lost 2-0, which was to say it was disappointing is putting it mildly, because everybody had hoped that we might start to recover something. So we We now are at home to Coventry. Is there a home programme there for Coventry, Steve? Yep, that's lovely. Thank you. And having had the struggles with them in the Texaco Cup, we actually turned this one around. We beat them 4-2, which was great. And Rafferty and Mortimer scored for them. It's interesting. They scored 5 minutes. Terry Hibbert scored in 6 minutes. John Studer scored in 7 minutes. I mean, the first 10 minutes was just manic, to put it mildly. And then in the second half, Malcolm MacDonald scored a penalty, and John Tudor scored another one on 57 minutes. And then they got a consolation by Mortimer on 67 minutes. So 4-2 was sent everybody home happy. 25,800 at the game. And as I say, everybody went home happy. Our team, predictable. I don't need to read it out. It's the one I've been reading all night. Coventry had one or two new characters in. They got a new goalkeeper because the Glazier had been transferred to somewhere else. I think he'd been transferred to Crystal Palace, actually. Ron Healy was the new goalkeeper. And Chris Catlin was playing in the defence and had a little inside forward, a bit like Tony Green, a Scotsman called Willie Carr, who had a long career in football and played for Scotland. And Dennis Mortimer that bought from Villa, Ian St John, who that bought from Liverpool, and Billy Rafferty, which that bought from Bradford. They had a tidy team. Well, tidy or not, we beat them 4-2 on that night, and people were starting to feel safe, is I think might be the right word to use, and not struggling down towards the bottom. And the next game is a home game against Tottenham Hotspur, and we're wondering what will come out of this, because Spurs are flying high by this time of the season. And lo and behold, we turn it on and we beat them 3-1 with 31,000 in the ground. With the same team, McFall, Craig, Clark, Natters, Burton, Howard, Barraclough, Tony Green, Malcolm MacDonald, John Tudor and Terry Hibbert. And Spurs with the team that thrashed when we went to Spurs. Pat Jennings, Joe Kinnear, Mike England in the team, Steve Perryman. Cyril Knowles now playing in a defence as well, who they bought from Middlesbrough. Ralph Coates, Martin Chivers, Martin Peters from West Ham, and Alan Gilzine, as said before, the Scottish centre forward. But we beat them 3-1, and it was an entertaining game. I remember being at the game. Good football match. Natras scored on 30 minutes. Gilzine equalised for them on 57 minutes. And then Malcolm MacDonald scored on 71 minutes and John Tudor on 76. And in my opinion, that was the match when Malcolm MacDonald and John Tudor worked themselves out, because together they frightened the Spurs defence to death. If one was moving, it wasn't moving, the other one was, and vice versa. And that kept the Tottenham defence on their toes at least, but not on their toes enough, because we well and truly beat them. And we now come to the FA Cup third round, which is a wonderful game. I mean, against Hereford United, God. You know, when I do this sort of thing, there's sometimes I'm struggling to find pictures, which is why I use the programs, you know.
Yeah.
Well, didn't he's struggling for pictures for this one, Steve? Good God, as you'll see, there's about 6. I mean, I could have filled the page with pictures of Hereford United and beating Newcastle United. So they come to St James's Park, and we have a 2-2 draw, with MacDonald and Tudor scoring our goals, and Colin Addison, the player manager, and Owen scoring for Hereford. I mean, what a frustrating game this first game was. I mean, we should have been out of sight, but we weren't. I mean, lo and behold, I mean, they were in the lead in a minute. I don't know if you were at the game, Steve. No, you wouldn't.
No, too young.
Too young. They were in the lead within a minute, and everybody thought, "Oh God," you know. But then Sutermac gets a pen in 3 minutes, so a 1-1. Everybody thinks, "Oh, that's it. We're back to square one. This is okay." 39,800 at the game, and then on 23 minutes, John Tudor makes it 2-1. Everybody's clapping their hands. Oh, this is it. We're on our way. Well, doesn't Colin Addison pop up in 25 minutes and equalise? And then it's backs to the wall. They just defended like their lives depended on it, and we just couldn't break them down. It was just awful. It didn't help that St James's Park was a quagmire. It was in its terrible state because there'd been snow and all ice and all sorts. But it was the same for both teams, is how I look at it. But we just couldn't break them down. They defended and defended, and of course one of the older characters in the team, like Ricky George, who had a good professional career in London, Ken Mallender, who played for one of the Sheffields for years, Colin Addison himself, the player manager, and Billy Meadows, who played for Manchester City, and then of course the centre forward, a man called Roddy Radford, who was to make a name for himself in this game. Anyway, 2-2. So we got to go for a replay. The next game though is a home game, is an away game rather, at Huddersfield, which is everybody's hoping that we get something. I think the Huddersfield one was before that, Steve. Anyway, Huddersfield. We go to Huddersfield. That's it, and we draw 0-0. It was a fairly ordinary game. 12,800 at the match. I mean, again, I say, how on earth did Huddersfield survive on 12,800 at their games at Leeds Road? I mean, it just beggars belief. They certainly couldn't do it now, that's for sure. Although they get sponsorship, so it doesn't matter anymore. Anyway, our team, unchanged, typical Harvey. The fact that they played a cup tie just a few days beforehand didn't matter. They were all in the team again the next game. McFall, Craig, Clark, Natras, Burton, Howard. Viv Busby came in because Barraclough was hurt. Tony Green, Malcolm MacDonald, John Tudor, and Terry Hebbett. 0-0 draw, fairly drab game. And Huddersfield had bought Trevor Cherry from Leeds, and Frank Worthington from Leicester City was the centre forward now, and Lee Chapman, a big striker from Sheffield United, I think initially. So they had a reasonable team, but we got a 0-0 draw, which was great for our league standing. So the next game is the away return leg of the Hereford Cup tie, and we go to Hereford for this return match. Now, interesting, there are about 3 programs, Hereford United programs, that all have our name on, and are for different parts of the ground, depending on where you sat, depended on the colour of your program, which I find quite bizarre, but never
really weird.
Yeah, isn't it? I mean, so there's all those programs, and then of course there's the disaster of the game, of course, that 0-0, and we got, yeah, it's a good time to talk about it. We went to Hereford, and we got blagged in this game because Hereford. I don't know if you've been to the ground at all, but I think the River Wye runs right next to the ground. And there was a story came out that the manager, Colin Addison, had hired a huge pump, a and parked it on the bank side of the river and was pumping gallons of water out the river onto the pitch because he wanted to make the pitch as sticky as he possibly could. Well, I'm told, and I've got no reason to doubt the person that told me, that somebody told Joe Harvey, somebody said to Joe, you need to get the pitch inspected. And he did. He asked the FA if a referee could go in and see the pitch to make sure it was playable. Well, fortunately, Addison had got rid of the pump by then, but the ground was wet. But the local referee thought there was enough time for the ground staff to get it ready for the match on the Saturday. So it was tactics of an era gone by. But I've got no doubt that the person that told me about all this would be telling me anything other than what was right. And apparently Joe Harvey was steaming. So off we went to Hereford, and we playing, and anybody that looks any of the pictures and certainly the videos and thing can see how horrible it is. I mean, it's ankle deep is the only way to describe it. And anyway, it's 0-0, and we get the 82nd minute, and bang, Supermac relieves us all with a beautiful goal, and everybody thinks, well, that's it. And then, lo and behold, 5 minutes before the end, a certain Ronnie Retford does the same and rattles in a corker against us as well, and so we're into extra time. 14,300, which at that time was the biggest crowd Hereford had ever had. That was the biggest number it had in the thing, and went into extra time, and then a fella called Ricky George, who'd had a career in London, banged in that one to make it 2-1, and there was no way we were getting back from that. There was that was it. I think there's lots of other photographs now of Hereford fans celebrating. I put them in because they deserve to show it. Look at poor Willie McFall on the pitch. He's surrounded by Hereford fans, and climbing up the floodlight pylons as well, and that's them celebrating in the dressing room. Well, you know, they won, and there's nothing more we can say about that. But
the magic of the FA Cup, George.
Absolutely, and there's one thing you can guarantee about BBC: when the FA Cup comes round, you will see that Ronnie Radford goal.
It's been on the day.
Yes, I mean, you're guaranteed. However, that was FA Cup over, which is very sad, and we then, of course, have the ignominy of having to pick ourselves up from getting beat off a non-league team to go to an away match. Guess where? Old Trafford, of all bloody places. I mean, everybody thinks, oh my God, this is going to be a disaster. Old Trafford after that schmozzle at is there a Manchester United programme there, Steve? I think there's yep, that's it. Good. And everybody's thinking, well, you know, we're gonna get a real hammer in here. Well, we didn't. We beat Manchester United 2-0. Would you believe? I mean, it's not just Newcastle, isn't it? You know, beat off Hereford the weekend, and then a couple of days later, we're beating Manchester United at Old Trafford 2-0. And the scorers, Tudor and MacDonald. As I said to you before, I think this is when the period where Tudor and MacDonald worked themselves out what they were doing. And we didn't ever let Manchester United in the game, is what I read, even from the Manchester papers. 45,000 at the game. And we, as I say, come home with a 2-0 win, which really does put us in the top half of the league now. We're not looking for championships, but we're certainly in the top half of the league. So then we come home to a home game with Everton, and everybody's thinking, well, if we can beat Manchester United away, surely we can beat Everton at home. Well, we don't beat them, but we get a 0-0 draw, 29,500 at the game, and they it was another one of those 0-0 draws, which was quite entertaining, actually, is my memory of it. And but the important thing is we're staying where we should in the league. We're not tumbling down the league to make us in any danger. We're stuck in the middle, and if anything, going up rather than down. So then we get the Everton game out the way, and we have an away match at Southampton, and we beat them 2-1, and that was a surprise because Southampton were playing quite well, and 18,800 at the game, and 0-0 at half time, and then on 65 minutes. Supermax scores a penalty. Then John Tudor scores on 72 minutes. And then David Craig, unfortunately, gives the consolation to Southampton with an own goal. But a good win, a good away win for us. So we're now heading home to a home game against Leicester. In all this time, without we're still playing the same team. I mean, we're now at home to Leicester. McFall, Craig, Clark, Gibb, Howard, Monker, Barraclough, Tony Green, Malcolm MacDonald, John Tudor, Terry Hibbert. 42 league games and about half a dozen or more because of the Texaco Cup games. We're talking about 50 plus games, and Harvey only uses 21 players. I mean, it just incredible. So we got Leicester at home, and we beat Leicester 2-0 with 25,200 at the game. Home teams, us the same, with one addition, and suddenly Terry Hibbert's injured, and a Scotsman called Jim Smith that Harvey just bought from Scotland, from Aberdeen, is in the team. Leicester have Peter Shilton in goal, David Nish at fullback, Graham Cross at centre half, Keith Weller on the wing, they bought from Tottenham, Alan Birchnall, they bought from Sheffield United, and Len Glover, a tiny left winger that they bought from Charlton Athletic. A good side, football inside Leicester at that time, but we beat them 2-0 anyway with goals from Malcolm MacDonald and Tommy Gibb, and that's as I say, kept us the right end of the league, which is the important thing. And then we have another home game almost immediately afterwards. Well, it's exactly a week afterwards. Arsenal at home, and well, now with people are thinking, well, if we could beat Manchester away and get some other results, surely we can give Arsenal a game. Well, we did give them a game. We beat them 2-0, and goal scorers were MacDonald and Tudor, and team exactly the same, no changes at all, with Jim Smith staying in the team because of the injury to Terry Hibbert. And Arsenal had the full side out, Bob Wilson in goal, and Geordie Armstrong, Alan Ball by now, who's left Everton and gone to Arsenal, and he's playing for Arsenal in this game. Ray Kennedy's playing for lad from Seaton Delaval. George Graham. I mean, Ray Kennedy tragically died just last year, I think it was, with Alzheimer's. He's a victim of that horrible disease. George Graham, Charlie George, and John Ratford is 2-0. We beat Arsenal, and that was great. And 34,000 at the game at St James's. I'm trying to think why I wasn't at that game, but Yeah, I can't remember. I certainly wasn't there, but it was a good game. We now, cock a hoop, we'll knock anybody down. It's the sort of feel in the Gallagher corner, and unfortunately, we've got to go to Liverpool to Anfield. Is the next one? I think that the program's there, Steve, somewhere, and that's it. And unfortunately, we catch them on a good day and us on a bad day. 5-0, bang. After all the victories and beating Arsenal and all of that sort of thing, everybody was flying high. Well, this certainly knocked the stuffing out of everybody. 5-0. Chris Lawler, Kevin Keegan 2, John Toshak, Emlyn Hughes, Steve Highway. These match reports that I use, it's interesting. When they talk about Kevin Keegan, they just don't print Kevin Keegan. They print Kevin Keegan OBE. Just right and proper, isn't it? I mean, anyway, the white, wallopness is the only way to describe it. And our team was exactly the same, except that Terry Hibbert was back on the left. John Tudor was injured, and Jim Smith just moved inside alongside Michael McDonald. And Liverpool, they're all stars. Ray Clements, Chris Lawler, Alec Lindsay, Tommy Smith, the Anfield Iron, Larry Lloyd, Emlyn Hughes, Kevin Keegan, Brian Hall, Steve Highway, John Toshak, Ian Callaghan, and 43,800 at the game. It brought us down to earth with a bump, should we say. The next game is a home game against Manchester City. And there may be a couple of pictures of that, that's right. And we got a 0-0 draw, which, having had the thrashing off Liverpool, we went into this game with some trepidation. But we got a 0-0 draw, and it was a decent game as well. And 37,500 at the game, which after we got a thrashing at Anfield is quite remarkable that would happen. So we give a good account of ourselves. Same team: McFall, Craig, Clark, etc. And Manchester City have now bought a goalkeeper from Coventry. Ron Healy has now gone from Coventry to Manchester City, and otherwise Manchester City's playing the famous team with the addition of Rodney Marsh, who they bought from Queen's Park Rangers. Very talented and gifted footballer. Sometimes controversial, but very talented. And in the forward line, Wyn Davies, of course, our old centre forward. We got a 0-0 draw against Manchester City. And as I say, with 37,500 in the ground. These are pictures from the actual game, actually. That's Manchester City, and that's our lot. And that's the back of Clarkey, the big number 3. Anyway, we now head towards away game against Sheffield United, and we hoping that we might do something here, but we lose 1-0 in a very, very drab game, is where I can read about it. Our team was untouched. McFall, Craig, Clark, etc. Sheffield United by now had changed quite a lot since we'd seen them earlier in the season, because they'd bought Eddie Cahoon from Wednesday, Jeff Salmons from Arsenal, Alan Woodward from Arsenal, Michael Spate from Nottingham Forest, and David Ford was on the left wing. Well, David Ford eventually comes to us, but at that time he was at Sheffield United. But they beat us 1-0 with Ford scoring the goal. And odd times I've often thought when I read these things and a player plays well against us, it's not long before Harvey wants to buy him. And David Ford was good in that game, and he scored the winning goal. Well, about 2 months later, he's at Newcastle. It could be wrong, but there's too many coincidences for it to be wrong. But never mind. We then we're off to Derby, to the baseball ground, and well, we hoped that we might recover, and lo and behold, we did. We had a 1-0 win, with the goal being scored by Tommy Cassidy on 70 minutes. 38,119 at the game, and that was probably one of the last away Derby games I went to, because, as I said to you, our Neil was born in 71, and about this time he was still a baby, and the family always liked to go to the Derby game, Derby match, because we're family in Derby. And then I thought, well, Marge will not want me to go because I'll stay at home and help her with the bairn. Well, I needn't have worried, because my mother volunteered to babysit for the whole weekend. So Marge went off for her girls, and I went off with the lads to Derby to be Auntie Nan's and to see the match, and got rewarded with a 1-0 win. That was the important thing. And Tommy Cassidy scored the winning goal. And we're now back at home, and everybody's thinking, well, oh, come on, we're due a good win at home. Well, unfortunately, it's Ipswich, and and I suppose it reflects on the team we're playing, but only 22,900 at this game, and we lose 1-0. And Weinmark, Trevor Weinmark, very talented striker for Ipswich for a lot of years, turned over, but they were. My memory is they were good value for the win. So we now, it's not a disaster. We're not near the bottom of the league anymore. We're sitting nicely in the middle, safe and sound. The next game's an away game at Nottingham Forest, and again, everybody's hoping, but hope springs eternal, as they say, and certainly does for Newcastle supporters, because we lose 1-0 at Nottingham Forest. Not entirely a surprise, I've got to say, because Forest were picking up by then, and they were round about the middle of the league as we were. 12,500 at the game. Our team, predictable: McFall, Craig, Keith Kennedy suddenly comes in because Clarkie's hurt. Natras, Howard, Blonker, Barraclough, Tony Green, Malcolm MacDonald, and Chris Guthrie sneaks in because John Tudor's hurt, and Gordon Hodgson gets his first team debut, having just been signed from the juniors the season before. So it's another defeat, but still not an entire disaster, as I say, because we're stuck firmly in the middle. And the next game's a home game against Leeds, and 43,000 at this one, and we beat Leeds 1-0. Now, I do remember this game because for two things. One, it was a good crowd, but also it was a good game. Leeds were on the metal and gave us a hard time. But they fought back, and everybody was delighted that Malcolm MacDonald scored the goal, because he's been getting kicked all over by Jack Charlton and Norman Hunter. I mean, you remember the story about Jack Charlton having his little black book?
Yeah.
I'll bet Supermac was in his little black book, because he kicked Supermac black and blue that match. And when he didn't do it, Norman Hunter did it between the pair of them. It really was a hard game. But lo and behold, the saviour of the day on 81 minutes, much to their chagrin. You could see their faces when the ball went in. You could tell they were really choked that they'd lost this game. But never mind, everybody else in the crowd was absolutely cock-a-hoop, and to see them lose. The next game is a away game at Chelsea, and we think, well, this is going to be hard. Well, it was hard, but we got a 3-3 draw. 33,000 at the game. And John Tudor puts us 2-0 up within 8 minutes. And then on 11 minutes, Tommy Baldwin, a Tynesider, gets one back. And then right on half time, Steve Kemba, the lad that bought from Crystal Palace, makes it 2-2. And then Tommy Baldwin, who would be a Geordie, scores what looks like the winner, except they hadn't banked on Malcolm MacDonald scoring an absolute screamer 3 minutes later to get with a draw. So 3-3, and it was a good game as well as that. And then the next game is home game to West Brom, and well, they're on the metal for this one. We beat West Brom 4-2, and they 2 to Supermac, 1 to Tony Green, and then Bobby Gould, who was playing for West Brom then, got 2 for them in the 50th and 53rd minute, just as almost as consolations, as it were. And anyway, we won 4-2, and that was sort of cemented a position in the middle of the league. And then the last game of the season, of course, was Stoke City, and it was a 0-0 draw. And we finished off the season with probably one of the worst games of the year, because that wasn't this one. It was miserable 0-0. It was, they could have played all day and neither team would have scored. And neither of our sharpshooters were on form either. And similarly with Stoke City as well. So that was 0-0, and it ended what was an interesting season, because, as I say, midway through the season, once Tudor and MacDonald seemed to know how to play with each other, the season turned on its head. From being heading towards the bottom, we suddenly headed up towards the middle and ended up slightly above middle, actually, and that 0-0 ended it. However, we weren't finished. The players went off on a tour of Thailand, and they played the select Thailand 11, played a team from Russia, Santos from Brazil, and Havana from Brazil as well. So they certainly used to get their money's worth out of the players in those days. That's all I'd say.
The liver friendly.
Absolutely.
Great stuff. And what was the final things you wanted to say about this season, then, George?
Just there was the Hereford thing, obviously, which it'll never go away. It'll always be there. As you said, it was on the day. But the other thing was that, as I say, the MacDonald-Tudor partnership, I think, was cemented in this season and became even more dangerous. And I think the sufferer for that was John Tudor, because I think Supermac got all the praise, but John scored some important goals, no doubt about it. And as I said earlier, I loved these diving headers, where he used to dive along the ground with his nose an inch off the floor. Players aren't that brave nowadays, I don't think. You know, very, very few players have put their head in that sort of position these days. Is my opinion. But at least we got over it and seemed to be set for a change. The only unnerving thing towards the end of that season was that whispers were starting to come out that Joe Harvey wasn't very well. And subsequent seasons, you'll see why, what happened. But it was, you know, ups and downs as usual as a Newcastle fan, and you just got to get used to it.
George, thanks for taking us on the journey. Newcastle United, those were the days, 1971-72. See you at the next one.
Okay, Steve. Enjoyed it.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
A big thanks to all our sponsors, starting off with Skips and Bins. Telephone 0800 25 45 25 3. Email inquiries at skipsandbins.com. The website is www.skipsandbins.com. Easy contract free and pay-as-you-go waste collection. Thanks also to Garden of Healing Dispensary, CBD hemp and cannabinoid specialists. Find them at thegohd.com. Thanks also to 3 Properties, and they specialise in sourcing investment properties for their clients who are looking to invest in the Northeast. They offer a full in-house service from sourcing the deals to managing the properties for you. They've done over 100 plus deals in the past 12 months for clients all over the UK. Give them a follow on Instagram, matty.patter_northeast property and phil.reed_northeast property, or email phil@3property.co.uk if you're interested in getting a good property deal. Big thanks also to Mr. Vicky's sauces, handmade in Cumbria. You can find them at mrvickys.co.uk or order some of the sauces by calling 01768 210 102 or emailing info@mrvickys.co.uk. Thanks also to Blowhole Brewery, and their cans are vast and in the shape of the old Newcastle United strips from the 1990s. Bonnie Blonde, Geordie Juice, and Fog of the Tyne. Some great beers. Get yourself to blowholebrewery.co.uk to order your cans in for the festive period. Thanks to Media Arts for all the help with the video side of things. And thanks to qtechshop.co.uk, makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend, Newcastle. If you want to subscribe to the channel, hit the subscribe button on the bottom right-hand corner. Hit the like button and click share. Please join the channel as well to support us. We're also available as a podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and other podcast providers. If you want to join the channel, you can use this QR code or just go to NUFCmatters.com and look for membership pack. If you join in that particular way, you get a scarf, a cup, a pen, and a membership card, and entry into the monthly draw. We also give you a free car sticker. All you need to do is subscribe to the show and then email john@nufcmatters.com to claim it. We also support the food bank on this channel, nufcfansfoodbank.co.uk. Go to that website and make a virtual donation today. A couple of events coming up. Paul Gascoigne is at the Fed on the 4th of December. Contact the Fed in Dunstan and Gateshead for more information. And Peter Beardsley, 20 tickets left for this, is at St Dom's Catholic Club in Newcastle on the 10th of February next year. Contact St Dom's via their contact details on their website or on Twitter. If you're looking for a Christmas present for a Newcastle fan, you can go to badboysbooks.net. You could order a copy of Enemy from the Bender Squad to the Gremlins, or the last remaining copies of Black or White, No Grey Areas by Lee Clark and Will Scott. If you're looking for a Christmas jumper for your night out, go to nufcmatters.com and get your Bruno jumper today.